Hello everyone, Sidewind here, and today I am going to be talking about another villain archetype. This archetype is what I call the spoiled brat. It is oftentimes the most hated villain archetype in media, alongside the bully, because many people have experienced it in their day-to-day lives. This is a character which is oftentimes best used as a minor antagonist in the main form I'm going to be talking about, because in general, the worst things they can do are just narcissistic and self-driven. They do not make for good big bad evil guys in a more fantastical game because they are so familiar to those of us in this world. So if you are looking for something to be the grand villain of the campaign, this is oftentimes not the best. But at the end of this video, I will be talking about a way that you can take this archetype and make it into that terrifying villain. So to start here, I'm going to talk about a key piece of psychology with this type of villain. This phrase, "I am entitled to," is their driving mantra. This type of villain believes that they are entitled to whatever they want, whenever they want it. They do not have boundaries. They do not usually have anything except a belief that they are the best and they deserve whatever they want. So this oftentimes makes them very insufferable. So I do recommend that if you're using this, do it sparingly. Because, again, it's familiar, it's annoying, and oftentimes, let's note that your players will try to murder this character. In fact, if they have to choose one villain to kill, it is probably this character. So now I'm going to go on to some questions raised by the spoiled brat villain. So the first one is, at what point does someone utterly cross the boundary of acceptable behavior? Because the spoiled brat just keeps pushing and pushing and pushing upon that boundary. They oftentimes do end up crossing that boundary, because that is what the archetype is. More severe versions of it, especially, cross that boundary. Because they believe they should get whatever they want. They don't think about others. They don't think about morals. They just think about what they want. The second one is, are there any boundaries placed upon the powerful? This is because the spoiled brat comes from a very privileged background. Something like a prince, the son of a rich merchant, that type of rank. There aren't really spoiled brats that are not of a super high rank, or at least those do not make good villains. If you are creating a villain, you should choose someone from a very high status. So, the third question, at what point do the powerful stop shielding one of their own? This is probably the key question raised by this type of villain. This question is essentially asking, at what point are consequences imposed? Is there anything that can push the villain over that point? Because, like, an example of this is the Baron's son from Dragon Age Origins, the elf origin. You can look it up, but this is one of the most hated characters in the entire franchise, because the powerful don't stop shielding him. So you can look that up. Quick warning, it is firmly M-rated, and I will give a trigger warning for sexual assault there. So then the fourth question, does justice act off deeds alone, or does status affect the outcome equally? This is building upon the earlier questions of, like, what sorts of consequences are actually imposed. Because if consequences from justice are based off deeds alone, the spoiled brat, if they break the law, will get consequences. But in the real world, that often isn't the case. An example would be if you have a speeding ticket set at a single price point. So if a speeding ticket is always $50, then that ticket won't affect certain people. Like the poor person who's only making $100 a week, that's half their salary for the week. They are going to care a lot if they're charged that. Meanwhile, someone making, say, $1,000 a week, that's not as big a deal. It's probably still a little bit of a deal, but it's starting to get minuscule. Now, if you make $1,000 a day, $50 is starting to look like it's not really anything. So that's really where the spoiled brat comes, because in general, since they're from the wealthy and the powerful, fines, they don't care. Jail time, they might care, but they have connections that might let them get out of it. If your world is idealistic, perhaps they do just face the consequences. But if it's not, they aren't actually going to face the consequences immediately. The final question is, does everyone face actual consequences? That's just building on the rest of them. Like, at what point is this character actually going to be penalized for doing what they want? And this is a very good villain to use if you have a character who is firmly from lower class backgrounds. If your player character used to be a farmer, say, they probably won't really understand why this is happening. So it creates a good sort of foil. Now, the other character the foiled brat can foil based off these questions is a moral character from an upper class background. So if one of your characters is a principled paladin from the nobility, then this character is going to seem possibly like a complete anathema. Like, how did this happen? Type reaction. Now, this final slide is how I'm going to talk about how you can make this archetype far more damaging and an actual big bad evil guy. This is something I've personally written through a campaign before. So essentially, the way you do this is, what if a spoiled brat believed they were the chosen one? This obviously would make them have even fewer consequences. And they probably believe they can truly do no wrong whatsoever. Like, the spoiled brat already believes that, but if they're the chosen one, well, everyone else will likely believe it too, at least wherever they're considered to be chosen. So it's basically a spoiled brat who is completely insulated from consequences. Like, no consequences will be imposed upon the chosen one by the authorities at large. None of the typical fantasy world authorities want to be known as the person who imprisoned the chosen one, or who executed the chosen one. Because that's basically like, we just doomed ourselves. So that can make this character much more damaging in that manner, especially if they have superpowers. Like, they're bad enough just being super entitled and normal, but if they can, say, light people on fire, imagine how much worse that could get. So when you're building a chosen one, you typically make it so that they have powers. The ones I suggest choosing are basically just physical powers. Physical powers are oftentimes bad enough to create this type of villain. Now, if you want an even more damaging chosen one, select powers that are mind influencing. A chosen one who can brainwash others while being super duper entitled can cause a whole lot more damage because they can force others to do what they want. Note that this is, again, like, you're going to start veering into not safe for work territory by choosing this. Because, well, if someone can do whatever they want, and they are as entitled as this character, what they want is probably not very good. So you should take a note of that before diving too deep into that psych. Now, the final thing you can do with this, and this is often what players would probably find very, very fun, is note the quotation marks around chosen one. So essentially, what you can do is make it so that they're not actually the chosen one. Perhaps a major plot point could be the players uncovering that and then revealing it. How would this character react when their entire worldview is flipped upside down? Do they just harden in their resolve? Or do they break? To leave you with a question, are there any interesting uses for this villain that you can think of? Please put those suggestions in the comments below. Thank you for watching this video, and I will see you in the future.